Fascism is not coming to America. Thanks for tuning into my show. My name is Ryan. I am the creator of American Angst Pod, and I'm here to tell you fascism is not coming to America. Now, before we get into the show, before I prove to you that fascism is not coming to America, a little bit about me. Some of you may not know me. You may have stumbled across my channel through Instagram or something like that. This is the very beginning of the show or the podcast, American Angst. Uh, I'm a very angsty person. I needed a way to talk about what is happening in our current environment and politics. And so I decided to create this show. I want to let you know that this show is my opinions about the government, about politics, about Christian nationalism. From my experience, I've been a pastor for over 30 years in the evangelical world. In the last 10 years, deconstructing those evangelical ideas and especially those Christian national ideas that I was indoctrinated into via American exceptionalism. And so I want to share with you a little bit about those things. So without further ado, let's get into today's first episode. And that is that fascism is not coming to America. Why do I say that? I say that because fascism is already here. And I want to share with you 10 indicators today, 10 indicators, historically speaking, of fascism. 10 indicators of how we could recognize that fascism is either coming or that fascism has arrived. In my opinion, has arrived. I'm going to share those 10 indicators with you and break down a little bit about them now. I want to make clear that this is not a comprehensive study on fascism. The things I'm going to share, the 10 points I'm going to share, come from research from the likes of Lawrence Britt, Jason Staley, and Hannah Arendt. You can look them up. These are historical indicators of fascism. So I'm going to share all 10 with you, and you can either agree or disagree whether you believe that these indicators are being, these boxes are being checked by the Trump administration and the people around him. But first, before I get to the actual 10 indicators of fascism, I want to share a quote that has stood out to me over the years. Just for the record, I have been anti-Trump from day one, the moment he rode the elevator, the golden elevator down and declared that he was going to run for president. I recognized from the very beginning that this is a narcissistic person who doesn't belong anywhere near the presidential office, the Oval Office, or the office of the president. That this person demonstrated a history of being about themselves and themselves only, and that this person was vulgar and vile and in no way demonstrates leadership worthy of the highest position in America, the president of the United States of America. Here's the quote. Sorry, I'm rambling a little bit. This oftentimes is attributed to Sinclair Lewis, but if you do a little bit of study, you'll recognize it's kind of a conglomerate of ideas that Sinclair Lewis put in his book, so not necessarily the first person to talk about it. But this was the quote: "When fascism comes to America, it will be wrapped in the flag and carrying a cross." Fascism is not coming to America, folks. Fascism is already here. Now, let me go over the quick top 10 indicators. I'm going to list the indicators, and one by one, let's talk about examples of those indicators. Here are the top 10 indicators of fascism. Number one, powerful nationalism, or us versus them. Number two, disdain for human rights. Number three, the scapegoating of enemies. Number four, supremacy of the military. Number 5, controlled mass media. Number 6, obsession with crime and security. Number 7, religion and government are intertwined. Number 8, corporate power and weak labor. Number 9, disdain for intellectuals and the arts or the sciences. Number 10, fraudulent elections or undermined democracy. These are the 10 indicators, historically speaking, of fascism. Now, if you're like me, I only need to hear those things, those 10 things listed out, and I recognize right away we're here. We have arrived. It did show up wrapped in the American flag. It did show up carrying a cross. It's called Christian nationalism. And the likes of people like Turning Point USA, the Project 2025, the Heritage Foundation, PragerU, you name all of these right-wing think tanks, a good portion of them are caught up in what will be called white Christian nationalism. And their North Star, their map, if you will, that they are following leads them to this idea of theocracy, that the white Christian rules by their idea or their negotiation or their interpretation of what's right and wrong based off of the Bible, and again, their negotiation of or interpretation of said Bible. Now, number 1, powerful nationalism, or us versus them. You could define that as a strong national pride that's used to divide citizens and define outsiders as threats, right? So historically speaking, and I want to overly talk about this idea about Nazi Germany, although the parallels are there. Like you'd only get upset about talking about the parallels because you recognize that those parallels are real and you don't want to talk about those parallels. But I don't want to get too caught up in the parallels. But Nazi Germany, fascist Italy, they glorified national purity and this sort of rebirth of their nation that fueled their ideas of conquest. Okay? So currently, in our current political environment, modern rhetoric that we hear from Republicans, from the President of the United States, is that real Americans are victims. They're victims of the elites or the swamp. They're victims of the immigrants. They're victims of globalists. And recently, the Trump administration, and this is kind of the flow I'm going to do. I'm going to tell you what the indicator is. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the definition of that indicator, the historical context, and then let's talk a little bit about what this Trump administration has been doing here in these United States of America, right? So recently, the Trump administration has repeatedly used and has always used this idea of America first and calls anybody who criticizes that idea as un-American. As you know, Donald Trump from the very beginning has run off of a rhetoric of make America great again. That is rebirth rhetoric. That is to say that there was a time in the past, in this great history, this American exceptionalism idea that America was so good and so great and so pure, and we need a rebirth of that ideology. And if you are a person of color, if you are a person who identifies with the LGBTQ community, if you are even a woman, you might be looking around saying, what history are we talking about? When you say again, what do you mean? Are you talking about when slavery was legal? Are you talking about when women couldn't vote? What are you talking about when you say again? Because American exceptionalism tells the lie that there was this time in American history where America was so good and so great, untouchable even, beyond reproach. It's a lie. Currently, federal communications emphasize nationalism as moral purity. Like the real Americans, the pure-blooded, red-blooded, flag-loving Americans believe that we should make America first and make America great again, that these are the real patriots. Powerful nationalism or us versus them. Number two, a disdain for human rights. Now, we could go on for hours about what this administration has been doing in our country in regards to the violation of human rights. Hours. Hours on what they're doing to undocumented immigrants in our nation, hours about what they are doing to folks outside of our nation in boats off of the shores of Venezuela, violations of human rights, offering zero due process and executing justice, quote unquote, against people. I'm getting ahead of myself. So, what do we mean? Disdain for human rights. We're talking about civil liberties seen as obstacles for state loyalty or security, or to state loyalty and security. So, historically speaking, authoritarian regimes dismantled rights like free speech and equality under the law. And currently, in this administration, we see that Donald Trump and all of his goons have rolled back DEI programs and reclassified federal roles to reduce independence on those people. So they've come in and said diversity, equity, inclusion, which, by the way, this is what makes America great. This is what makes the idea of American patriotism great, is diversity, equity, and inclusion. That people from all walks of life, irregardless of their ethnicity, irregardless of what country they're from, irregardless of their gender, irregardless of how they identify and their sexuality, that they all have the ability to participate in this thing called America, to participate in the freedom and the pursuit of happiness. Everybody gets the opportunity to do that. What are some recent incidents? Well, the Trump administration had the reinstatement of Schedule F, which stripped job protections for civil servants. And again, I'm not giving you the full rundown of all of these things. Go look this stuff up. It's easy to find. It's easy to dig in and understand what is happening around us. The closure of DEI and civil rights offices across agencies. We've seen them systematically say that diversity is no good, that we don't want diversity. They claim that diversity, equity, and inclusion is placing people in positions that they're not qualified for because of their race or because of their gender or you name it. And so they're claiming that those people are unqualified in those positions. Mind you, in the same breath, they turn around and put the most unqualified people in the cabinet for this administration. People like Pete Hegseth, a white cis male who has no business being anywhere near the top leadership of our military. But here we are, a failed Fox News host running the Department of Defense. And I refuse to call it the Department of War because that is bullshit. Number three, scapegoating of enemies. This is where leaders unite followers by blaming targeted groups of people for the national decline. Understand that. So the leader tries to unite all of their people, big groups of people, against blaming targeted people for national decline. So the Nazis demonized Jews and communists. We know this. We've gone through history classes. Mussolini targeted socialists and immigrants. Again, we've seen this if you paid attention at all in history class, we know this. And in current US parallels, we have modern politics that are vilifying immigrants, a modern rhetoric that is vilifying the LGBTQ citizens among us, modern rhetoric that is villainizing journalists and considering them or calling them to be threats or an enemy of the people. Recent incidents, Trump's administration revoked temporary protective status for Venezuelans. So almost over 400,000 residents who previously had temporary protected status, legal status, he revoked that from them. Why? Because they're Venezuelan. That's the only reason why. Because their skin color is not white, because they don't necessarily speak perfect English. That's why. And it's the only reason why. It's racism, it's white supremacy. And other incidents where he's repeatedly attacking or labeling the media or educators or pastors as woke and enemies of the people. Woke and enemies of the people. Anything that they don't like, they scapegoat as woke, and they call anything that is woke an enemy of the people. So if you believe in rights for LGBTQ, you're woke. If you believe in diversity, equity, and inclusion, you're woke. If you believe that people who identify as trans should have equal rights as anybody else because of the simple fact that they are human beings and therefore deserve dignity as a human being, you are woke. And as a woke person, this administration has declared that you are an enemy of the people. Moving on. This is where it starts to get a little scary. Number 4, supremacy of the military. A militarization of domestic life and a glorification of armed power. Anybody remember that silly parade that Donald Trump put on for his birthday? Do you remember that? That's what he was trying to do, this over glorification of our military power. So historically speaking, Mussolini had his black shirts, Hitler had the SS, and they merged policing, like local community policing, with the military, with the army in their cases. Now, currently, the Trump administration has expanded military involvement in domestic policy. Unprecedented. I know we hear that word a lot, but it is true. It is unprecedented what Donald Trump has been doing with Pete Hegseth in enacting the military against its own citizens. Here are some recent incidents. Recently ordered troop deployment to Portland and the ICE facilities here in Portland. I live in Portland. Donald Trump declared that Portland is a war-ravaged city. That is a lie. He is using that terminology intentionally to justify sending National Guard troops into our city to police our citizens. We have some citizens who are exercising their First Amendment rights in front of the ICE facility, declaring that ICE needs to leave. Declaring that we are opposed to the inhumane ways in which ICE is acting, disappearing people, in some cases unaliving people, without due process, without warrants. Some of these folks, American citizens, some of these folks living under protected statuses, and yet they don't care. They roll in, and based on the color of your skin, maybe based on the accent that you might have as you speak, they try to arrest you or detain you. And we'll figure it out later if you're an American citizen. It's appalling. Recently, I don't know if you saw this, where Hegseth called the top military brass from all over the world, 800 of them, to one location, which, by the way, is insane in and of itself. He called them all in so that he could grandstand in front of them and talk to them about what he thinks is the warrior ethos. At that meeting, Donald Trump promoted, just kicking around an idea here. I've told Pete, hey, Pete, what if we used American cities as training ground for our military? Think about that for a minute. He's talking about using an American city as a way in which they can train for military readiness in other countries. That is fundamentally anti-American, unconstitutional. That statement alone should cause there to be an impeachment process against this president for how un-American and unconstitutional it is. An American president calling for the military to practice military readiness against American citizens is so far beyond the pale, we don't even have an understanding of where to place it. Number 5, controlled mass media. Independent journalism is replaced with state-aligned propaganda. Historically speaking, fascist regimes centralized their media control through propaganda ministries. We are fully seeing this happen in the United States of America. You can't argue that this is not happening. Current U.S. parallels. Modern attacks target NPR and PBS and Voice of America as biased institutions, as biased media outlets. Recent incidents, Executive Order 14290, defunded NPR and PBS, targeting these critical outlets. We know the NPR filed a lawsuit claiming this is an unconstitutional retaliation against them because they don't fall in line and say what the administration wants them to say. We've seen him pull Jimmy Kimmel offline or off air. You say, well, Trump didn't do that. Well, Trump's FCC secretary bullied ABC into pulling him off the air. Bullied Disney and Sinclair and all of the people who are involved into pulling him off air because they need the Trump administration to secure deals for them, to make sure that they're posturing to become more wealthy, to have more control over media doesn't get interfered with. So what do? They listen to the FCC chair who bullies them into pulling Jimmy Kimmel offline or off air, and Trump does that. Trump has sued a number of companies, a number of media companies, and those media companies should be ashamed for bowing down and giving him these settlements that they've given him. Because in giving him the settlements, you are giving him fuel for his fire to claim that what he is doing is justified, and it is not. And shame on you, you weak cowards who gave in and settled in these courts, giving up your First Amendment rights for this weak leader. Moving on. Number 6, obsession with crime and security. This is where fear of crime justifies repression and surveillance. This is what we're seeing with the military rolling in. This is what we're seeing, all the talks about the borders, all of these elements that are happening. Dictators use public safety as a pretext for detention and censorship. So Trump's administration's amplified this crime wave rhetoric to expand their control. The crime wave in LA, the crime wave in DC, the crime wave in Chicago, the crime wave in Memphis, the crime wave in Portland. Every single one where it goes unchecked, every single time he's not called to the carpet on these things, it just empowers for another city and another city and another city. It creates a chilling effect where other cities refuse to actually push back on the regime coming in to their town to take over, to quote unquote, quell the crime wave. Recently, we've seen where he's declared crime emergency in DC via an executive order. Recently, we've seen Border Patrol raids in Chicago. Detained U.S. citizens using military tactics. If you didn't see the story where they had Black Hawk helicopters at 1 o'clock in the morning over one apartment building in Chicago, rappelling down, pulling everybody out of the building, putting women and children, some unclothed, in zip ties in the back of a U-Haul. We're going to figure out later if these people are citizens or not, claiming that the entire apartment building is part of Tren Aragua or whatever. Insane. Number 7, religion and government become intertwined. This is the Christian nationalist piece that we are seeing. Faith becomes a political weapon used to define belonging. Historically speaking, Mussolini partnered with the church, and Nazis promoted positive Christianity. Currently, religion is increasingly used to justify policy and to define identity. So because they can claim that their interpretation of the Bible is that sexuality looks this way or gender looks that way, they can declare now that it is un-American to accept these ideas or these people because the Bible says so. Is insanity. It is foolish. It is un-American. It is unconstitutional. Recently, Executive Order 14183 banned transgender service members, citing religious morality. And I've watched some videos. I've watched some of these folks that have been forced to retire, not even able to have a retirement service in their uniform, even though their entire military career is marked with only high levels of competency, high levels of leadership, high levels of bravery, high levels of patriotism. They're being removed simply because they are transgender. And Trump frequently claims this sort of divine calling, this idea that God has maybe put him in position. He's hearing that from Christian nationalists, from the likes of Paula White and the Jensen Franklins and the Robert Morrises, who, by the way, was just convicted or pled guilty to sexual assault and rape of a minor and is going to be serving prison time, who was one of the key people that was a faith advisor to our current president. These people are telling him that he's been divinely positioned to lead the country into this new awakening of Christian nationalism. This idea that Christianity is under attack in America. It's not true. There's no proof. There's no data to support that. Number 8, corporate power and weak labor. Corporate elites merge interest with government authority. Historically speaking, Italy's corporate state gave industry power over the labor. The Nazis abolished unions altogether. Currently, in the U.S., we have deregulation and weakened worker rights, which mirror fascist corporate collusion. Recent incidents, the deregulation that favors oil or big tech or defense sectors. Again, you can go look all of this stuff up. Federal labor protections and union rights are scaled back. Just look at the inauguration when the wealthiest people in the world, the Mark Zuckerbergs and the Elon Musks and the Jeff Bezos, had front row seats, had unfettered access, giving to the administration $600 billion in the next 10 years. All they are doing is working so that they can obtain more power in our government without regulation. How about this one? Disdain for intellectuals, the arts, or the sciences. Intellectuals and artists are labeled as elitist and unpatriotic. We know that Nazis burned books and Italy enforced cultural conformity. We have the quote-unquote party of small government going into the schools now and banning books. banning books to the point where teachers have to give a list of every book that's in their class. And if some right-wing nut job feels like this book is not appropriate, then we're just going to go in and we're going to ban that book from the classroom. Currently, we have DEI and academic freedom programs dismantled nationwide. A federal ban on DEI content in contracts and education. Conservative campaigns pressure schools to remove anti-American works. So we're seeing this idea, and we could talk about RFK Jr., the most unqualified human health secretary probably in the history of the United States of America. Unqualified by the way that he thinks, unqualified by his history, unqualified by his anti-vax stance, unqualified by the fact that he's had a brain worm and we're not even sure he thinks clearly, unqualified the fact that he's constantly on Zins, like he can't even have a meeting without a Zin in his cheek. The guy looks like leather that's been left out in the sun for years. And we're supposed to believe that this guy who can barely even speak, that this guy is the epitome of human health, who continually dismisses the actual science, the actual data, who dismisses actual scientists who have given their entire life as apolitical people, not allowing politics to influence the way in which they do their work. And he's discredited them completely. Disdain for intellectuals and the arts. We can talk about the museums that have been taken over and shut down. We could talk about the way they're sending back artifacts because they don't want to actually talk about American history and slavery and who we really were and who we really are. We don't want to look in the mirror. We don't want to talk about intellectualism or the arts or who we actually are. Let's just paint this false picture of this American exceptionalism. And lastly, number 10, fraudulent elections or undermined democracy. Manipulation or delegitimization, my apologies, of elections to consolidate power. I'm getting a little worked up. Hitler's and Mussolini's elections became ceremonial under one-party rule. We see it with Putin. Putin's elections ceremonial. North Korea's elections, do they even have them? No. Persistent election denialism undermines democracy and voter trust. Recent incidents, you and I know this, false 2020 claims, fraud claims, they continue to talk about them. DOJ is pressured for partisan investigations. So the DOJ now under Pam Bondi, again, probably the most unqualified attorney general we have ever had in United States history, is being directed by the president. Mind you, it should be a separation of powers here. The president does not run the Department of Justice. That's not how it's supposed to work. But that's how it is working. Being directed by the president to go after people who prosecuted, who investigated those who continued the idea that the 2020 election was stolen. The likes of the Rudy Giuliani's out there in the world, or even the J6ers who took over the entire Capitol. Trump is sending National Guard to Portland over one city block of a few protesters outside an ICE facility. Meanwhile, he claimed that the 2020 election was stolen and therefore riled up an entire group of people, an entire crowd, to riot against the Capitol on January 6th. And you know what he did for those people? He pardoned them the minute that he got into office. And now he's using the Attorney General to go after, the Justice Department to go after those people who investigated January 6th. New state laws restricting mail-in or early voting access. He's been talking about that regularly. Gerrymandering out in the open, like just, hey, go get me 5 more seats. I know that it's like they're admitting, we know that our policies are so bad that we can't win on the merits of our policies. We can't win on what we're doing actually in our office. We've got to go out and gerrymander and get 5 more seats in Texas. I'm hoping you're seeing these parallels. Okay. Again, fascism is not coming to America. Fascism already here. And these 10 indicators, I have given you example after example, And to be honest with you, we would need another hour or two to really comprehensively go through each one of these deals and lay out everything that Donald Trump has done, the executive orders that he has signed, which, by the way, when he wasn't president, claimed that that's not the way you're supposed to be president. If you're signing executive orders, it means you're not a good president. You're not a good leader. You're not a good negotiator. Now he's claiming I'm on record numbers for executive orders, like it's some sort of badge to be worn. And why does this matter? Because fascism adapts to its time and its place. And the danger today lies not in the uniforms of the military or those things, but in the attitudes that we have about this. Fear replacing trust and loyalty replacing law. This is what we're seeing in our government right now. Fear replacing trust and loyalty replacing law. Fascism doesn't just show up one day, knock on the door and be like, hey, it's fascism. Will you let me in? It's little by little, we start to see democracy and freedom be stripped away little by little. And next thing you know, you wake up and you were living underneath a fascistic regime in which there's no turning back. Fascism isn't coming. Fascism is here. And I hope you will join me in standing against it. And when you see these indicators happening, you will talk to your friends, you will talk to your neighbors, you will share about it on social media. However you can, you will stand against and resist fascism. Because now is the time. Thanks for tuning in. I think I was supposed to say this at the beginning. Like, subscribe, share, all of those kind of things. I'm new to this. Let's keep this rolling. I'll see you next week.